Welcome to the serialized audiobook, The Reef, written by Scott Sigler and Matt Wallace. Narrated by Scott Sigler. Hello, junkies! Welcome to episode number 4 of The Reef. Hey, The Reef is finally up as an ebook for Kindle and for Nook. Go get it. And the full-length audiobook is coming soon to Audible and iTunes. It's been submitted to Audible, but just has to finish up their quality control process. Then it will be available for your ears. The Reef is, of course, a Galactic Football League novella. There are currently 5 novels in the Galactic Football League series, with 3 more to go. Do you want to snag book 1 of the GFL series for free as an ebook or a serialized audiobook for free? You can see what all the hubbub is about. Visit scottsigler.com/therookie and get in on this awesome star-spanning hero's quest. But let's get on with The Reef, episode number 4. Let me get you caught up on the story so far, and then we're all going to go flip some flapjacks. Previously on The Reef. Chiyal North is stuck in the town of Break My Back, a dome city on the reef, far out on the frontiers of known space. In Break My Back, he's worked as a bodyguard and an enforcer, but he's just been banned from any freelance work. Without a credit to his name, he heads to the one place he hopes he can find some direction. The Brace, Break My Back's worst dive bar. Chapter 5. The Brace. Break My Back, like all towns on the reef, was built with Quith Dome technology. As such, the town was ordered in concentric circles. The big tent of the slab was the town center. The farther out you went, the more low rent the buildings and sentience both. Considering the quality of beings that lived in Break My Back, being more low rent was really saying something. At the very edge of town sat the Brace. The saloon was so far from the town center that the saloon's rear wall was the dome itself. Beyond the Brace, there was only open reef. Sooner or later, Chiyal always ended up at this place. Whether because it got too hot in the town center, or he couldn't afford booze anywhere else, or a particularly miserable day was trying to devour him whole, the Brace was where he came to recharge. Everyone, no matter how diamond hard or double tough, needs a safe haven now and then. The Brace was his. It was one of the oldest saloons in town. The sentient who built it, no one remembered who that was and the town records were long since lost, had carved down into the purple-black rock, excavating around what became the Brace's defining feature, a 10-meter-long, gently curving bar made from solid slate. Once upon a time, that bar had probably gleamed like amethyst-infused obsidian, polished and beautiful and fine. If that was the case, that, once upon a time, had been forgotten along with the original owner. Decades of broken bottles, brass knuckles, thrown knives, steel batons, and general bar brawling had left chips, scratches, gouges, and divots in the once grand surface. The rest of the place didn't really matter. Battered prefab walls, cheap chairs, cheaper tables. As long as patrons could sit at that storied bar and knock back cheap alcohol, no one gave a damn about the decor. Even before Chiyal landed on the reef, the Brace was the bloodiest slaughterhouse in Break My Back. It attracted the worst of a bad element. Dregs too nasty to keep company with goodly hobos. Knifemen so unscrupulous even other knifemen didn't trust them at their backs. And outlaws so craven and dangerous they'd worn out their welcome in a town run by outlaws. Before Chiyal adopted the Brace as his local, there had been at least 1 killing a week in the place. Since he'd arrived, though, things had calmed down, because he'd calmed them down. He was a keystone species of one. He changed whatever ecosystem he entered. The first night he hit the saloon, he took down an entire gang that operated from the place, running whores and dealing illicit narcotics of all kinds to all species. Chiyal cleaned the gang out, but he did it respectfully. He didn't bust up the saloon. He tossed every single body out through the door into the street, before following them out and applying his own brand of citizen justice. The ground outside the brace was painted red for a long time after. The message was clear. The brace was no longer a place to run game. Some of the regulars got the hint and never came back. Those that stayed appreciated an environment that provided their lives a few less beatings, a few less threats. As dusk settled over Break My Back, as the opaque dome slowly turned from white to dark gray, Kyle's bare, blood and mud-caked feet carried him into the brace. Things weren't better in the saloon than they'd been before, per se, but the fights weren't as violent and they happened less often. Fluff, a heavy key, was the only patron in the saloon. His bulk took up half the bar's length. Fluff was the biggest key that Kyle had ever laid eyes upon, including the referees who had worked in the octagon during his big fights. With scales a color somewhere between black and dark red, the sentient looked dangerous indeed, even though nothing could be further from the truth.
Carry,
Fluff said.
Hell-O.
The long, thick sentient didn't turn his head to look at Kai. He didn't have to. The sentient's 5 equidistant eyes let him see in all directions at once. Fluff no doubt started out bigger than the average key, but now every segment of Fluff's form was choked with ever-expanding fat. The heavy key wore a thick platinum chain around his fat neck that might have fit at one point, but now looked like a garrote, half hidden by bulging flab. Fluff was perpetually tipping back a 2-gallon stein fashioned from the carapace of a young quith. It was filled with blood spiked with spirits. Kyle never knew nor had the desire to ask from where or from whom the blood came. "What's new, Fluffy?"
Drink.
Fluff said.
I drink.
"Which is different from every other day in your life, how, exactly?" Fluff might have shrugged or might not have moved at all. It was often hard to tell. Fluff rarely left his claimed region of the bar. Kai had to assume the key didn't relieve himself on the spot, although it was possible that Dynamite, the proprietor, just mopped up around Fluff at the end of every evening. The mammoth heavy key was one of the few regulars who'd survived Kai's purging. A lot of that had to do with the fact that Fluff was too fat, too drunk, and far too lazy to start any trouble. Most of the time. Kai didn't have much pride left in his life, but he was proud to be one of the few sentients that had been to Fluff's place. Fluff lived, literally, in a hole in the floor of an abandoned shack not that far from the brace. Through the hole was a halfway decent crawl space, not quite enough room for Kai to stand up straight, but when you sat in a chair and drank, and drank, and drank, it was as good a place as any. As far as Kai knew, only he and Dynamite knew where the heavy key lived. Kai didn't know a syllable of key, but Fluff actually spoke some broken English. Extremely rare for that species. Kai and Fluff didn't exactly talk all that much. They spoke the universal language of the drunk. Fluff wanted to hide away from existence and drink himself into a coma. Kai could relate. Where most saw Fluff as a grotesque wreck of a sentient, Kai saw him as a living, breathing monument. Fluff was the last surviving member of the town's founding clan. Break My Back had begun as a key settlement. They'd chosen a solid spot that had yet to be colonized by Shimmerscale and Orange Branch, by diggers and fangfleas, by humans or quith. A mine was drilled, the dome went up above it, and for a few years the place was a boomtown, a commercial and cultural diamond in the rough shining brighter every day. Prospectors and citizens of every race descended on it. The key who'd carved the town out of the purple-black slate welcomed them all. The town's glory days lasted until a gang of humans rolled in and decided they wanted it for themselves. They started a fight that became a war. That war had apparently lasted years before the dust finally settled. The humans won. They changed the name of the town to Break My Back. No one remembered what the town had been called before. The old name didn't matter, though. Not even to Fluff. Break My Back was a direct jab at the key, both mimicking the phonetics of their language and a reference to the Purist Nation death rhyme taught to children about their species. Fluff was the only surviving descendant of the town's founding clan. If you brought up that subject, he'd promptly knock your head off. The rest of the time, he was as passive and silent as the lumpy mound of dirt he resembled. Fluff just wanted to drink himself to death. Unfortunately for a heavy key, drinking oneself to death was a process that might take a century or more. Kai straddled his customary stool at the opposite end of the bar. He slapped the crumpled, stained currency note on the polished, chipped counter in front of him and waited. He should have used the money to buy food. Maybe he would next time. Maybe. Like chum in the water, perhaps it was the smell of money that brought an old man out of the back room. Dynamite slid behind the bar, picked up the dirty note with a withered hand. The old man placed a fresh mug of brew down in front of Chiyal. Kai drank deeply, gratefully. Dynamite squinted at him.
You ain't got no shirt on.
Chiyal nodded. The old man leaned over the bar, looked down.
Ain't got no boots on neither.
Kai drained his beer, pushed the empty glass toward the old man. Your point? The old man refilled the mug as he pointed to a square of slate hanging on the wall behind the bar. Laser-etched letters read, "No shirt, no shoes, no service."
Gotta have clothes on to drink here, Lash.
Instead, he looked above the mirror to the massive rifle mounted on the wall. Long as a typical human was tall. Double-barreled, the bore so big he could have almost slid his mug inside of it. Deep red notches, 31 of them, carved into its wooden stock. 6 groups of 4 vertical lines with one diagonal slash through them, along with one lone line that seemed to be waiting for company. A long time ago, Chiyal had asked Dynamite about the weapon. It was called a punt gun. Kai asked what the weapon had to do with football. Dynamite didn't know. The weapon was designed specifically to kill Key, to blast their huge tubular bodies clean in half. The marks in the stock represented the Key lives the gun had taken. Dynamite came out of the back room, holding a bundle of white cloth in one hand and a battered pair of brown boots in the other. He set the clothes on the bar. Kai nodded toward the gun. You know, something I never asked you. Some of those notches must represent Fluff's family, his grandparents maybe. He doesn't mind you hanging that thing above the bar? Dynamite jerked a thumb at the mountainous key.
Fluff's the one what brought it in, the old man said. He called it his trophy. I didn't ask from whom. That's bartender etiquette, you know.
Lovely, Kai said.
Personally, I'd just as soon take it down.
Dynamite stared at the monstrous weapon.
Reminder of bad old times it is. After the dust settled and most of the Key were gone, the Flathead gang scrapped most of those guns, their damn shop being so big and expensive. Only 2 left in town, far as I know.
Where's the other one? Dynamite only shrugged.
My guess would be the War Lodge. You know that thick building at the end of Main Street, the red one?
Kai leaned back, cocked his head. You mean the Flathead gang's place, where Valenti lives? Dynamite nodded.
One and the same. That's where Fluff's family lived before the Flatheads took 'em out.
That was cold. The humans had wiped out Fluff's family, taken over the town, then set up shop in the Key family's home. There wasn't a much better way to declare, yeah, we're in charge now. There weren't all that many established laws across the entirety of the Reef, but one of the few break-this-and-you-die tenets was no guns. The term gun applied to just about everything that spit something out one end meant to cause damage, but on the Reef, that word meant anything with enough power to punch a hole in the dome. Early boom and bust days of the Reef had been bloody, a free-for-all that saw sentients kill each other more often than not. Shootouts on Main Street, a daily occurrence. Trouble was, if you threw lead and missed your target, also more often than not, those bullets kept going. Sometimes they hit a building and everything was all right. Other times, they flew in a straight line until they hit the only object that could not be avoided, the dome wall. Bullets had a tendency to punch through those dome walls, letting the precious air inside vent out to the hostile atmosphere beyond. A bullet hole here or there could be repaired. When the Johnson gang had it out with the Shell Rim prospectors, though, it was a different story. In the gunfight itself, 17 sentients died. After the town was abandoned, someone went back and counted the bullet holes. 315 of them. Too many to repair, too many for the dome's self-healing ability. 17 had died by bullets. Another 72 had died before they could get to EVA suits or breathing masks. After that, word went out across the length and breadth of the slate. No weapons that fired supersonic bullets were allowed. Because the potential ramifications of such weapons were so severe, the Reef unified in a kind of frontier justice that superseded any tribal alliance or loyalty. Anyone caught with such a weapon was immediately hung. As with most things on the Reef, sentience got carried away with this new law. Understanding which guns fired supersonic rounds required study, learning, patience, things in short supply. The mob-minded populace instead came up with a much simpler solution. Possessing anything that used gunpowder to fire a bullet constituted an immediate, fatal offense. In short order, such weapons vanished from the Reef. To fill the void, engineers created spitters, powerful air guns that shot metal pellets. Enough firepower to hurt, and often kill, a sentient, not enough to puncture a dome wall. There was one slight exception to the no gunpowder rule, though, and that was shotguns. Bullets had enough mass and velocity to penetrate the dome wall. Shot didn't. Shotguns were still rare, though. If a particularly persnickety enemy saw you with one, you might still wind up dangling from a rope. So while shotguns weren't openly carried and were rarely actually used, a few relics like the one above the bar remained. Chiyal picked up the shirt. It was an oversized white sports jersey. He was looking at the back, number 12 in blue with red trim. Above the number, the word Nifty. "Who the hell is Nifty?"
Was, Dynamite said.
"Who was Nifty?"
Not much of a sports fan, are you?
"No," Kai said. Despite having made his living in the octagon, he didn't give a damn about silly games. A fight wasn't a sport. A fight was survival. It was domination.
Sabat the Nifty, Dynamite said. Team captain of the Demolition team up there and kicked my nuts. Gentleman who used to own that thing was a big fan.
Kai turned the jersey around. Reef Stompers logo in blue and red. A smaller 12 on the left rib area. Between the logo and the numbers, at the sternum, a small, scorched, coin-sized hole in the chest. Kai stuck his pinky finger through the hole and looked at the old bartender questioningly. Dynamite shrugged.
Previous owner didn't bleed out much, and what there was washed away fine. Seemed ashamed to waste good clothing, store-bought and such.
At least he washed it, Chiyal thought, as he slipped the second-hand jersey over his head. Dynamite pulled a rag from behind the bar and wiped down the chipped top, an automatic, thoughtless motion practiced by bartenders from time immemorial.
Heard about that fracas you put on over in the slab this afternoon, he said.
How? I came straight here from there, and there ain't exactly a buzzing crowd of gossipers in here. Halfway down the bar, Fluff belched. Or maybe it was a laugh. Kai could never tell the difference. Dynamite shrugged.
I hear things. I've told you before, the slab is Valenti's turf. You keep mucking about there, you're liable to end up dating Dottie.
Dating Dottie. Town slang for Valenti chaining you to a big chunk of rock and letting a Rama beast eat you alive. Dynamite stopped wiping.
I know you can't get hired for nothing these days, Lash. I'd hire you myself, only...
Kai nodded. Only you don't have enough customers.
To be fair, you did kill most of the ones that paid well.
Fluff belched again. Dynamite put the rag away.
Lash, maybe it's time for you to move on. The Reef's a big place. Damn big.
Exactly how big is damn big, old man? Dynamite's eyes narrowed.
You been here, what, 2 years?
Give or take, Kai said.
2 years, and you never before bothered to ask anyone how big this place is?
Kai took a drink of beer. Never seemed all that important.
Something tells me there's a great many important things that you don't think are all that important.
Kai couldn't argue with that.
The Reef is 1,714 kilometers long, Dynamite said. 285 kilometers wide in the middle, tapering to the ends. The Reef kind of looks like a turd when you think about it.
Kai lived on something that looked like a turd. Kind of fitting when he thought about how his life had turned out. That sounded big, although Kai didn't really know the perspective. Nor did he care. So it's a turd, Kai said. A really giant-ass honking big old turd. So what? Dynamite huffed.
Well, at any rate, it's big and there are plenty of towns for you to go to. I've seen more of this place than most ever will.
Right. And when did this myth happen?
Smartass, Dynamite said. You got no respect for your elders.
I got no respect for anyone. Dynamite considered this, then nodded.
I suppose you don't at that. For your information, I wasn't always this skinny piece of weak old gristle you see before you. I've been walking the slate for going on 50 standards now. When I was a young man, like you, I wildcatted from one end to the other.
Kai finished his second beer. Give me another. Dynamite glanced at the mug.
You only paid for 2, plus a tip, of course.
Kai said nothing. He sat there, hoping Dynamite would cave. The old man did, sighing heavily as he filled Kai's mug. Kai drained half of it in one pull.
You could say thank you,
Dynamite said. I'm not much for pleasantries. You should know that by now.
And look where that got you, Dynamite said. Spending money you don't have on beer, wearing the clothes of a dead man because that's all you got.
Kai stared at the half-empty beer. Maybe the old man was right. Maybe it was time to make some new habits. Maybe. Thanks, Kai said. Dynamite nodded.
Was that so hard?
It was. Kai decided to change the subject. You saying I should go digging or caving? Maybe waste my life looking for industrial diamonds or drilling for Jinkarta stone.
Jinkarta stone's a fool's search, Dynamite said. And you're smart enough to stay the hell out of caves. Even as big as you are, I seen grumblers large enough to swallow you whole. And that's if the ramen don't get you first. I'm not saying you should prospect, Lash. My point is there's more out there. A lot more. Maybe there's something for you. Maybe you can finally find your way.
Kai examined a particularly deep scratch in the bar top. Wondered if it had been made by a nice knife or a cheap shiv. You'd miss me, old man. Dynamite nodded.
I would at that.
This place would go back to being a meat grinder.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, Lash. I like my peace and quiet, but I'm not exactly building fortunes for my grandkids.
Kai hadn't thought he could feel anything anymore. He'd been wrong. He was being politely dismissed from the one place in the galaxy he considered home. It hurt. So that's what this is about, he said, the words transforming his hurt into anger. You like things the way they were, like the rough and tumble? Dynamite grabbed the rag, started wiping again.
Ain't never seen you put hurt on a body that didn't either have it coming or deserve it all the same, the old man said. Still, maybe you try not to kill so many of the locals in the next town. After a while, people start to notice body counts, even on the reef.
Kai drained his mug.
And when you go, Dynamite said quietly, leave the girl be. She don't need to see you no more.
The old man's words, a paralyzing nerve cluster strike followed by a direct kick to the balls. Dynamite filled the mug one last time.
On the house, he said. Consider it one for the road.
Kyle looked at him, then nodded. One for the road. Dynamite couldn't make him leave. No one could. But this wasn't about forcing him out. It was Dynamite's place, and he was asking nicely. Because Kai was a cancer. The longer he hung around anyone, any place, the more damage he did. Maybe moving on was for the best, even though he had no idea where he'd go. Kai picked up the mug and drained it in one sustained gulp. Turning it upside down, he clapped it atop the bar. Fluff, Kai announced, the brace is yours now. Take care of her. Fluff raised his gargantuan carapacial stein. He belched. Twice. That, perhaps, was the key's special way of saying goodbye. Letters from the Reef. Part 2. Epitaph. The following was translated from a carving of key cuneiform, an ancient pictorial language used in that species' poetry and other verbal arts, found on a slate boulder outside the town of Break My Back. I am Tum Al Thrunk. I am Key. I am the last. We came to this place. We were the first. We drank its blood, all of its blood. It is our place. They came after. Parasites, humans. We were stronger, fiercer, mightier. They were more every day. We slaughtered them, score after score. Then came the thunder from steel. Tall weapons, as tall as humans. They made them to kill Ki. Still more came. Every day, fewer Ki. More thunder from steel. Our weapons were stronger. We were stronger. They were more. This is their place now. I am the last. The fight is over, but I am still here. The last Ki. I will drink blood before I am gone. That was episode number 4 of The Reef. Fluff and Dynamite are interesting characters, and you can bet your sweet patootie that we will be seeing them again. And now, Kai, aka Lashkari, is walking around in what is basically a big old white hockey jersey. So it's a hell of a good look for him. It is a bummer. The one place Kai could think of as home on the Reef is now denied to him. The man has absolutely nothing, so what does he do next? Can find out next week on The Reef, episode number 5. Until then, I will talk to you all real soon. You have been listening to The Reef, a Galactic Football League novella. Written by Scott Sigler and Matt Wallace. Narrated by Scott Sigler. Audiobook directed by A.B. Kovacs and engineered by Steve Rickyburn. Copyright 2019 by Empty Set Entertainment. All rights reserved. Theme music is by the band Amps and Volts.